Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Auzu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Jazakumullah everyone for joining, and I know people will be joining as we talk. Alhamdulillah, we are on day 5 of our Tabligh Ashra. So far, we have learned so much just about Tabligh. We've covered topics on what Tabligh is, why we should do Tabligh. Yesterday, we had a very inspirational and very informative talk by Mansour Malik Sahib, missionary of Iceland. And he gave a very good insight into how he carries out his Tabligh. And we learned so many new things and methods of how we can carry out Tabligh here in the UK. Again, today we are very honored and privileged to have another very esteemed guest, Yusuf Pender Sahib, who is a very devout Ahmadi Muslim who accepted Ahmadiyyat in Ireland. Just before I bring you onto the platform, Yusuf Sahib, I just want to give a small introduction to our listeners today. Yusuf Sahib was born in a Roman Catholic family and culture. He appreciated that there were some good teachings in Christianity. However, he was not satisfied with some aspects of how God was being presented. He felt it did not do justice to God's being and majesty. He embraced Islam in 2005 and first came to know of Islam through MTA International in perhaps 2002, 2003. He moved to the city of Galway, where the center is in the same year, and he has been involved in the Jamaat and in Tabligh since that time until today, alhamdulillah. So with that small introduction, I would like to invite Yusuf Sahib onto the screen. Assalamu alaikum, Yusuf Sahib. How are you today?
Wa alaikum salam, I'm good. Thank you for having me on the platform.
No, it's an honor for us for you to have accepted our very our invitation at such a short notice. So Jazakumullah, and I appreciate the late hour, especially here in the UK, for you to come on. Yusuf, just before I ask you any questions, I want to just introduce you to our program. Alhamdulillah, we've been having a few lessons, daris on the topic of Tabligh, and we're sort of trying to take everyone on a small journey around different countries of Europe and getting to see how Tabligh is being carried out in those countries. But yesterday we had a missionary, as I mentioned, from Iceland, who talked about how he carries out his Tabligh activities and how people have accepted Ahmadiyyat through those methods of Tabligh. But with you, it's going to be a bit different because you're almost the fruit of the hard labor, you can say. You have accepted Ahmadiyyat, and so it would be lovely to hear from you why you accepted it, what techniques of Tabligh were used for you to accept Ahmadiyyat, and what you can advise everyone listening today of how we can all get involved in carrying out Tabligh here in the UK. So firstly, I just want to ask, you are from Ireland. Many of us have probably never been to Ireland. We've of course heard of it, but if you could just introduce the country itself, some attractions of Ireland, what Ireland is known for. Yes, that's what I'll ask you first, please.
Sure. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ireland, I think many people in the UK know a lot about Ireland anyway. It's a country of 32 counties. It was part of the UK for maybe more than 800 years, part of the British Empire, part of the UK. And then in 1928, Ireland gained its independence, or the south of Ireland gained its independence from the UK. And I think around 1976 or so, we joined the European Union. Ireland is generally, the things which Ireland is famous for are things like, being the Emerald Isle, or being the land of Céad Míle Fáilte, which means 100,000 welcomes, the land of, tourism and of a simple people. Other than that, I think the things which Ireland is famous for has kind of changed over time. Unfortunately, I'd say in the 80s and 90s, Ireland was very infamous for the troubles in Northern Ireland. So whenever you generally hear about Ireland, it was not good news, especially for living in the UK. Since then, obviously, Ireland has become a more peaceful and modern country. I think a lot of the cultures of many countries have kind of merged in together now. So if you go to Dublin City, it's not that different in terms of culture from London or from Paris or from anywhere else. It's quite a liberal country. So a lot of liberal policies have taken root in Ireland as well before many other countries. Used to be a Catholic country, very Catholic, but because of, I suppose, many scandals in the church and just the general rise of secularism, Ireland has become a very overly secular country, a country which people are not generally very much welcoming of the church. So very liberal, secular, modern country now, I would say.
And we mentioned just briefly in your introduction about how you're questioning Christianity, and I know that go back 100 years ago, Christianity was rife in Ireland. It was at its peak, but slowly, as you mentioned, it's declined, and many of those people now of the younger generation don't have as much attachment to the church as their grandparents, if you can say. So how in that time, how were you introduced to the Jamaat? Was it through people? Was it, as you mentioned, MTA was also a factor?
Mm-hmm.
But how did the Jamaat itself accommodate you in this introduction?
Well, I mean, I suppose I grew up in a small village, so it was very Catholic. The syllabus or was very Catholic. We call it catechism, which we learned in school. So this was something that was instilled in us. I suppose depending on the personality of the person, some people it would make an impression upon, and most people it wouldn't. But it's something which made an impression upon me. And I think that growing up, I was generally a very spiritually minded person. I would express that spirituality, I suppose, through Christianity because that's the faith I was born into. But as I grew up, I mean, just to kind of make it short, I suppose, I began to question. The main question I suppose I had was that many faiths speak about God, they write about God, but there's no real access to God himself. And I wanted to have an experience of God beyond just reading theology and theory. I'll give you the example, like if someone's really hungry, so reading about food or looking at pictures of food won't satiate them. So I wanted to have that experience of God. Used to pray a lot as a Christian, but I wasn't satisfied. I looked at other faiths, and I suppose ultimately the fruit of my prayers to God was coming across MTA, because I'd never actually met someone who wasn't a white Irish Catholic, basically. So I didn't have any exposure to any other culture or religion. So through MTA, basically, I began to watch the question and answer sessions of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi Rahimullah, and very, very impressed with this man's personality and character, because I felt I found someone finally who is making this bold claim that they have direct experience of God, and they are inviting other people and guiding other people into how they can have that direct experience. And this is the thing I wanted. This is the experience that I wanted, and that's what drew me into, I suppose, towards the Jamaat, among other things as well.
And just for the people, the viewers who have just joined us, we were just talking about with Yusuf Sahib, mashallah, how he's from Ireland and how he's introduced Ireland to us in a very beautiful way, almost wanting us to almost visit physically. It's a bit difficult these days with the COVID, but definitely after it all calms down, we'll do our best to try and visit all those attraction sites which you mentioned at the start, and also how you were firstly introduced to the Jamaat through MTA initially, by living in a small village in Ireland. And so I know as well, just on the side note, you have some affiliation with Midlands, especially with the Jamaat in Walsall. I know your family are from Warsaw, your other half, you can say. So Jazakallah, it's a very nice connection as well for us personally to be able to have that as well. If anyone has any questions, then please could you just leave them on the comments just at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get to the questions at the end, inshallah, and we'll ask Yusuf Sahib those questions, or I can answer them as well. Just carrying on with the talk, and mashallah, it's very nice for you to be able to have that experience, because you were questioning, and then all of a sudden, MTA came onto your screen and you were listening to Khalifa Rabi. What was the next step then? What did you want to do? How did you find the Jamaat from that small village?
So I guess I was watching these question answer sessions of Huzur and other programs on MTA for some time, and my heart was becoming more and more set on the fact that this community is true, and if I'm this feeling of satisfaction which I was looking for in terms of having a connection with God was coming through this community. So I decided to actually write to Fazal Mosque in UK, and basically asked them two questions. One is that, can I have a copy of the Holy Quran? Well, the second question was if there's any Ahmadiyya community in Ireland. And it's basically from that I received correspondence from the person who was then the Emir of Ireland, whose name was Dr. Limuddin. And he actually wrote me a very beautiful letter, which I think I still have somewhere. And he gave me his phone number, and we began speaking on the phone, and I would ask him questions about Ahmadiyya. He gave me an introduction to the Jamaat as well in Ireland and worldwide. And he started sending me books, and I was reading the books, and I was speaking with him on the phone. And after some time, I decided that I wanted to meet members of this community and have a closer, I hadn't made my mind at that time that I was going to become an Ahmadi Muslim. It was still a very big decision to make. But I did meet with him and the Imam Ibrahim Noonan Sahib, who was missionary in charge of Ireland. We met a few times. I went to the centre, which is in Galway. At that time, there was no mosque, so there was like a mission house. And I think it was about a year of I was visiting them, and they were visiting me, and I was reading different books. And finally, in I would say around December 2005, I made the decision that I wanted to live my life as a Muslim, because I had stopped, eating pork. I didn't drink alcohol. I was praying. I was reading the Quran. So for all intent, and I was believing obviously in Allah and His Messenger and in the promised Messiah Islam. So for all intent and purpose, I was a Muslim. What was left was just to declare that and sign the Ba'ath form. So yeah, about February 2005. Yeah, it was February 2005 actually when I signed the Ba'ath form. And then I think a few months later, I actually decided that if I'm going to kind of grow as a Muslim or survive as a Muslim, I needed to be in closer contact with the Jamaat, because a very important part of being an Ahmadi is being part of the Jamaat, being part of a community. So I actually moved from my village a few months later to the city of Galway, where I am now for the last 15 years. And it's from then that I've been living and working here and continually being part of the Jamaat here.
MashaAllah. That's very beautifully said. And I think when you're aspiring to improve your spirituality, you always want more. You don't want to stop. And with you, as soon as you accepted Ahmadiyya, you wanted to keep going. And I think one of the amazing things about our Jamaat is there are so many things set up for you to get involved in. And one of those things, as we are talking about the belief, is preaching. So I'm going to ask you now, did you want to get involved straight away? All the knowledge that you were gaining, the experience that you just had, did you want to just go out and just tell the whole of Ireland that the Messiah has come accept him? Well, how did you go about it?
So in one sense, obviously, I felt that I wanted to preach to people, but I was also quite a shy person. But one thing we had established in Galway was these Tabligh stalls. So we would put a table in the city centre, and I joined that, I think, within maybe a week of coming to Galway. And I didn't have experience in doing Tabligh. I didn't have an awful lot of knowledge. But what I did have was this kind of certainty in my heart that this was the right path. And at the end of the day, as Muslims, we're not there to convince people. All we can really do is invite people to know more. Like, there's only so much you can tell someone on a Tabligh stall. I think that's the best education I got in learning Islam, was actually talking about Islam on the Tabligh stall, because there isn't any question that you're not asked by atheists, by Christians, by Islamophobes, by non-Ahmadi Muslims, and I think that's I know Hazur has said, may Allah be his helper, on a few occasions, that if you want to increase your spirituality, you should do Tabligh, and it's definitely I think the best education you can get in Islam, in Islamic knowledge. One of the best educations is to do Tabligh to others.
100%. And Yusuf Sahib, you sent in a few pictures, which I just want to show everyone. So here we have, you got the Tabligh stall. Was this in your early times, or?
No, this is recently, because of the mask. You can see this is during the, last week, I think.
Gotcha. And the more you got used to it, what is like the sort of the mindset of Irish people when they come to you? Do you get a lot of opposition, or are they more open-minded, or how do you go about talking to them?
Generally, Irish people are, on one side, they're open-minded, but on the other side, they're quite dismissive of any type of organized religion, because of what I mentioned previously, the experience which Irish people have had with the Catholic Church, and it's kind of the control which it had over the Irish people for a long time, and unfortunately the way it sometimes views that control. So people are not necessarily confrontational, but they're just very wary of any type of organized religion. Obviously, you get different types of people. You will have people who, are afraid of Islam, or have negative, ideas about Islam. We know that you'll get people who are atheists who will just attack the concept of religion. But the good thing about the stall is that even if nobody, or not too many people, come on the stall, we have that sign, as you can see there, one of the banners we have. So people see the face of the promised Messiah as they're walking past. They stop and they read the banner, even if they don't want to come near us. They still, that picture of the face of the promised Messiah will be in their minds. In this way, the Tabligh is meeting people, but it's also just having a presence there as well. So it varies. I mean, you could do with the Tabligh stall one week and you could get a lot of opposition. The next week you get a lot of good responses, and one week nobody's coming to the stall, and then the next week you're really busy. It depends on the people. In wintertime, it's mostly local people. In summertime, maybe more like tourists and stuff like that. So, and we do Tabligh stalls in other parts, like Dublin city centre and Cork and other places like that. And it's nice that sometimes someone comes on the stall and says, "Oh, I've seen your stall in another city, so you're that community." So yeah, it's good. I mean, it's a great way to meet people and tell them about Islam, because the problem is, I suppose, even though we have a beautiful mosque in Galway, a lot of people are afraid to enter into the mosque because of concepts they have about Islam. So if you come out onto the street, people feel more relaxed. We don't, even if people just come and they look at the books or take a leaflet, you judge the person. Sometimes you start a conversation. Sometimes you see they don't really want to talk, and you just try to make sure that you give them a leaflet. But it's a good experience all around.
And mentioning that the Tabligh stall is such a fantastic method. You mentioned people don't really like coming to the mosque, but in this picture I can see that there are two individuals there that you are actually talking to. So could you just explain to everyone what's happening here?
This particular picture, I mean, we have had some mosque open days, which have been successful, and some other events. But this is just a picture, I think it's from about a year ago, where two Italian architects, they had seen many mosques in Turkey and other countries. They had traveled, and when they saw our mosque, from an architectural perspective, they were extremely impressed by the architecture of the mosque, and liked the way they said that a lot of mosques, when they're built, they kind of stick out a little bit like a sore thumb. So if you have a Western society and you put an Ottoman-looking mosque there, sometimes it looks out of, it doesn't look right, they were saying. But our mosque, we specifically built it to complement the kind of classical Irish architecture that you'd see in churches and buildings around our city. So they were really impressed, and also because they traveled to Muslim countries, they'd heard of us Shia and Sunni, but they never heard of Ahmadiyya. So yeah, that was the opportunity to just explain to them and to give them a Quran, because they didn't, even though they visited Muslim countries and seen many mosques, they never actually read the Holy Quran. So that was just, they actually came to the mosque themselves, and it was just a good opportunity to introduce the Jamaat to them as well.
Yeah, I think it's very important to capture the moment. When people do come into the mosque, it's a great opportunity to talk to them and also give them our religion, especially the Holy Quran. And the Holy Quran, as you mentioned at the start, it was one of the first things you asked the Jamaat for, because you wanted to actually read the book of Islam. So that's incredible. And alhamdulillah, so far we've talked about what initially attracted you into the Jamaat, which is MTA, and then how you developed your relationship with the Jamaat and with Allah through Tabligh, with Tabligh stalls, mosque openings. But there's also this one picture which you also sent. This poster, "The Messiah has come," and I believe this is in a bus in Ireland. So could you just explain? This is also a great initiative. So the idea is we're trying to get as many methods as we can that we can learn from, which work. So was this a success, would you say, in Ireland?
It was a success. We've done this 2 years in a row, and it was a very good success. We got, sometimes we'd just travel on the bus, and we would just listen to people saying that, there's another Messiah, like a second one. And, people would, obviously, the picture of the face of the promised Messiah salam is very striking, and just the statement that the Messiah has come. We got a lot of letters. We got a lot of abuse on social media. We did a small social media campaign as well. But even when you get abuse, that's good, because it means the message is getting out. People are getting the message. It's about exposure, because eventually you get on the bus once, you see this picture, you're busy, you don't have time, you get on the bus again, you get on the bus a third time, and then you say, what is this? What is this actually? And then you get the chance to read it and get the message. And it's just about exposure, whether you're in the city centre, whether you're online, whether it's a leaflet through your door, whether, it's about catching different people in different places and seeing that message again and again, because we live such busy lives. We get so many leaflets through the door. We see so many things online. Sometimes we just kind of blank it out. But if you repeatedly see something, and this is how advertising works, isn't it? You see something again and again. Eventually, even subliminally, it works its way into your mind, and then one day you're reading a magazine, or one day you're flicking through the channels and you see that face, and it clicks. So yeah, it works in the sense that we got good feedback from it, and also we pray a lot of prayers as well, and that inshallah we'll continue to do this. We're looking at other ways of tabligh. This will probably continue as well, but it's just one of the different ways that I suppose we're trying to reach out to people.
Alhamdulillah, it's really incredible work, and I really admire that, the confidence and the passion just to be able to do that. It takes barriers to break down, but once you do, then the field is open to whatever work you want to do. So if that's working for you, then I pray that it continues working and more people can accept the message about it in Ireland. You touched upon something just earlier about how the Irish people are open-minded, but as well they're a bit reluctant, because they don't want to really move out of their own circle, kind of thing. So I wanted to ask you, because this is obviously a learning opportunity for everyone as well, for someone who used to be a Christian and accepted Islam. So what are some of the common arguments which Irish people would make against Islam for not accepting, and what are the counter arguments which you would possibly give them to answer their allegations, you can say?
There's a huge array of arguments. I suppose A lot of Irish people would say things like organized religion is a dangerous thing, but I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. And the thing is that people associate Islam with rules and regulations. You hear things like Sharia law, so they don't really associate Islam with spirituality. And generally, if people want spirituality to go towards mindfulness or Buddhism or something which they feel is light on rules, I suppose you just explain to them. I mean, so, and it depends on the person. That when we talk about religion, we talk about faith. We're talking about, you know, there are two kind of parts. There's having an experience of God, but there's also having an experience of God with others. And if you have an experience of God with others, it enriches your experience. And so if people have an experience of God together, that's, you know, they form a community. And so we are basically, you know, presenting them with a faith community of people who have the same belief, who have the same experience of God, and who are working together to improve themselves and improve their society. And it's human nature that we need to, if we want to change things, we even improve ourselves sometimes, we need to work together. So just try to explain to them in a very soft way and using soft language. Language is important as well. I mean, and just try to, I suppose, focus on that. You know, when we say we come to the mosque, we're worshiping God together. We're having a communal spiritual experience, and then we have a fellowship out of that experience. And this is what we mean when we say faith and religion. When they think of faith, they just think of, you know, the priest banging the altar and saying, you know, no, no, no. So we have to kind of change what comes into their mind when they think of the word religion. Change what comes into their mind when they think of the word Sharia. Replace it with the true meaning, and so that the mental images and the thoughts which come to their mind are transformed. That's, I suppose, one of, and again, it depends on the person. Each person has a different experience, different neuroses, come from a different background. But generally, I mean, there's so many more arguments that I could go into, but here in Ireland, generally, this is the main one. This is whether you're, you know, a spiritual person or an atheist, whether you're a secularist or traditionalist. All these people here have this fear of repression by religion. So this is the thing which we always try to, I suppose, kind of break through that wall.
Yeah, mashallah, that's incredible. And if you were to recommend one book to give to Irish people, what would that be, and why?
I don't know. You know, there's so many books, and I've had the blessing of really reading all of the English books of the Prophet Messiah, especially when I first converted. I would read them. I remember the book Revelation, Rationality, Knowledge and Truth. That's if you're a very intellectual person, that's a very good book for you. I generally think that it's The Life of Muhammad Sallallahu is a very good book, because everything is linked with the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And if you understand his personality and character and understand his life, then you understand Islam. So I think that's the best way, because it's through the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that you fall in love with God, and it's through the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, that you come to spirituality. And again, it depends on the person, but that's generally the book I would recommend in a general sense to people.
That's very, very useful tips there, and I hope everyone listening can catch on to those and utilize them, inshallah, when we do start physically doing tabligh again. As you know, we're doing more online things these days and retweeting and all sorts of things. So one thing I just wanted to quickly ask you as well, mashallah, your own story is very inspirational, the way you accepted Ahmadiyyat. But after accepting the Ahmadiyyat, have you had any inspirational incidents with anyone through your own tabligh? And has anyone shown interest in the Jamaat in that way?
Alhamdulillah, we have a few converts in Ireland. Some of them are Irish. Some of them would have been Sunni Muslims as well. We have some wonderful converts. So one particular convert, for example, he he actually came to the Jamaat through a TV program on our national. So it would be the Irish example of a version of the BBC or RTE. So there was actually a TV program done about the Jamaat. It was called something like "Are You Afraid of Muslims?" So they interviewed one Irish Salafi, and his story is very interesting because he actually was on the news, I think about 2 years ago. He actually blew himself up in Iraq. So that's how his story ended. But then they also interviewed some other converts, Shia, then they interviewed the Jamaat Ahmadiyya. So they interviewed myself and Imam Ibrahim. And this person, whose name was Alan, he was actually a Protestant minister, and he'd been a Protestant minister for 20 years, and he was responsible for, I suppose, the west of Ireland. But he also had an interest in Islam. He had some interaction with Muslims. So when he saw this program on TV, whatever he saw, he was impressed with our community and how we spoke and how we were presented. So he actually came, to our mosque. We had meetings with him, discussions with him, and he fell in love with the Jamaat, and he fell in love with the Prophet Messiah, and he converted. And eventually he actually left that position, or retired from that position, and became an Ahmadi. And I'll never forget, what the first day we took him on the Tabligh stall, and he was sitting on the Tabligh stall, and every now and then people would stop and they would look at him, and then after a while I asked him that why are people looking at him? And then he told us that actually because he was for 20 years a Protestant minister, all of these people were his former congregation, and he received so much communication from these people and so much criticism as well. When the news got out that he was a Muslim, it actually gave him an opportunity to preach to them about Ahmadiyya as well. So we have these kind of interesting stories in our Jamaat. We do have some converts. Some of our Irish converts are living in England. Some have moved, like one is in Germany, in America. But we do have a small dedicated number. I think the important thing is that even if you have a small number of converts which are active, it's much better, in terms of the Jamaat, than having a lot of converts which are not active in the Jamaat. So at least mostly the converts which Allah has given us are and of course, just to mention as well that your grandmother as well, of course, Sister Patricia, is a convert as well, as we know, and very active, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. It seems like, the converts are coming. Alhamdulillah, they're coming in numbers, inshallah. Over the years, many people have accepted, and many more will accept as well, inshallah. And we're able to see more Irish people in the Jamaat. And I think it's very nice. That's what the beauty of Ahmadiyyat is. It doesn't matter who you are, we're all connected. And we are all connected to one physical person in Jamaat. And this leads me on to my next question, Yusuf Sahib. Maybe you saw Khalifa Rabbi Rahimahullah on TV. Did you ever have this aspiration or this desire to actually go and meet the Khalifa? Was this concept of Khilafat something totally new to you?
Yeah, this concept of Khilafat, in the Catholic faith, obviously, there is this concept of a Pope. But though it might seem superficially similar, it's very dissimilar, because the Pope is very, very far away from the people. And I never felt a sense of connection in this respect. It's sometimes beyond words to kind of explain the connection which we have with Khilafat, the love which Allah puts in your heart for the Khalifa. And we know that even, and I've seen this when Hazur may Allah be his helper came to Ireland on 2 occasions, the effect which he had on people which were not even Muslim, which never met him before. I never got a chance to meet Hazrat Khalifa Masih Rabbi Rahimullah. He passed away in 2003. I remember one day turning on MTA and seeing people walking around the coffin and paying their respects. But it's an amazing thing that when Hazrat Khalifatul Masih al-Hamas, may Allah be his helper, became Khalifa, that the same like feelings in my heart began to appear, even though I had never seen him before, and I had come into Islam, or I had spent a lot of time watching the videos of Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi. I began to really have the same feelings of love and loyalty and appreciation for Huzur. And again, this is just Allah's fazl, that whoever Allah chooses as his Khalifa, he creates that that love and bond in people's hearts, even people like me who at the time wasn't an Ahmadi as well.
Yeah. Yusuf, we've had such an incredible talk so far. It's almost impossible to do justice to your whole journey in just the time that we have. But if you allow me, I just have a few questions. And the first question is about Khilafat. So this is why I wanted to first introduce Khilafat like this. The first question we have from everyone listening is, most Ahmadis are born into Ahmadiyyat. How can you encourage us to love Khilafat like you do?
I don't think, I'm not ever going to say that we don't know who loves Khilafat more. I mean, I look at people like you, Murbi Sahib, who are missionaries who've dedicated their whole life to Islam Ahmadiyya. I mean, people like you are the real, diamonds and jewels of this Jamaat, alhamdulillah. And people like us, we're trying to just, emulate the sacrifices which you're making. But I think that a point comes in everyone's life when they have to convert. So, for example, I remember Hazrat Khalifatul Masih Rabi rahimullah, if I'm correct, that it was his experience. You can correct me if I'm incorrect. That he had a point in his life when he didn't question, but it came into his mind that I'm an Ahmadi. This is before Khilafat, obviously, when he was younger. I'm an Ahmadi, but this is not something which I chose, and this is something I was born into. And am I really doing justice to just accept it and not question it? So he spent his whole one night in prayer and also reading so many books of the Promised Messiah Islam and the Khulafa. And he said that, in paraphrasing, that he fell asleep late that night, and he had a dream that he saw the earth, and the earth broke into so many countless small particles, and every particle was saying that this is your God, this, and he woke up and Allah showed him that certainty. And in a sense, I suppose, like what Christians say about being born again, a sense, a time comes in your life when you have to be born again. In a sense, you have to really look into your faith, because there's a faith, and it happens to a lot of people in Islam and not just in Christianity, where their faith is their inheritance. It's the faith of their forefathers, and they might subscribe to it in a very superficial way. They might subscribe to it in terms of being a core pillar of their identity. But when it comes down to actually really from your heart declaring that you're for that faith is not there. So I think we have to, at some point, and Huzur has said this so many times, may Allah be his helper, that every night before we go to sleep, we should examine ourselves. We should examine our actions. We should examine our thoughts. We should, and only Allah knows whose faith is stronger. I often hear this thing that people praise converts, and I understand that the Jamaat obviously has special love for people who convert, but we don't know who is closer to Allah. And my own admiration is like I said, for people who are in Jamia and people who are serving as Waqf Zindagi. They're the real people that we should be looking up to, because they're the ones who are making sacrifice every day, I think,
Funny enough, we're also those people who look up to the converts as well, and we always say how amazing it is, because we're born into it, we're given everything piecemeal. But with you, you're changing your whole views, your whole way of life. So that is also something to look up to for everyone as well. Continuing on the topic of Khilafat, there's obviously a spiritual connection to Khilafat, but also with you, you've had the pleasure of having a physical connection with Khilafat. And in this picture, could you just explain this picture to everyone?
Yeah, this is, I believe, it was 2014. So I had finished Quran some years before, but I had a desire to do my Ameen with Huzur, may Allah be his helper. So this is when the mosque was being officially opened, and Huzur came, and he there was an official reception. And during those days, one of the engagements Hazur had was to do the Ameen. So it was interesting. There was a line of small children, and I was standing in line with them to do the Ameen with Hazur. And I remember Hazur, when he saw the children, and he just did a second take with me and just smiled, And this is just a moment when I read some of the Quran as you do ceremonially with Hazur, and Hazur just turned to me and he said, how many years have you been in Ahmadi? And I said, no, Hazur, I finished Quran a few years before, but I just wanted the blessing to do Ameen with Hazur. So it's every Ahmadi's dream, obviously, to have that opportunity. So just Allah bless me that at that time I got to have that blessing of sit as well. Just even sitting close to Hazur like that is having that memento of a picture is it's a blessing as well.
Yes, and there's also one more picture. I believe this is a family mulaqat you had. So how was this experience? There's one thing doing Ameen with Hazur in front of everyone, but this is your own personal meeting with the beloved Khalifa. So how was the feelings of meeting Hazur in these moments?
I think everyone knows when you meet Hazur, the way that Hazur pays attention to you, it's like you're the only person who exists in the world. Like Hazur 100% sincerely cares about that person and who they are, what they're feeling at that moment. And Hazur shows like such love and grace and gentleness and kindness. And when you have that opportunity to meet Hazur, it's overwhelming. And obviously, like you only have a few minutes because so many people want to meet Hazur, so it's only fair Hazur's schedule that you get maybe 4 or 5 minutes. But when you walk out of that experience, you feel like your soul has been cleaned. We see when we watch Hazur on MTA, even we see the noor and beauty of Hazur and Hazur's words. It doesn't do like justice to Hazur's person and personality and character. It really feels like you're in the. I know I don't mean this like in a literal way, but sometimes it feels like you're in the presence of God, or you're in the presence of God's really loved one. So it's very, very like holy and religious experience, and you have so many things you want to say to Hazur, but if you're like me, your mind goes blank and you just sit there and you're just content to stare at Hazur and be in Hazur's presence. And that's the one thing I think of the many things we miss during this pandemic, is having the opportunity to see Hazur in person, whether it's mulaqat or in Jalsa. So we hope that this pandemic will go soon, so we have an opportunity to see Hazur in person again, inshallah.
Exactly, it was very beautiful of you to share that, and it's always nice to hear from someone who's accepted Ahmadiyyat, and it's amazing that the feelings are the same. The way you feel about Khilafat is the same that the person next door will feel. We all feel this awe, this presence of Khilafat. Then we all think that our relationship with Hazur is only me and him. Then when you hear everyone else speaking, you start to realize that Khilafat has this relationship with every single member of the Jamaat, and he really gives you that attention, like you are his best friend. And I think that's one of the most humbling feelings for anyone, especially for someone who's come into the Jamaat. That makes him that person feel within the community, and I think that aspect is probably what has strengthened your bond with beloved Hazur and with the Jamaat as well. So continuing on with the question, mashallah, people are really enjoying the talk, and people are really saying that mashallah, it's very inspirational to hear someone to accept Ahmadiyyat in such a way. So one question which someone has asked is, many Western countries are more into sciences than into religion. How can we do tabligh to them and make them understand that God exists?
That's a very difficult question. But and obviously, you're asking someone who is not a scholar, who is just a regular person. So I'm not going to be able to give you a very deep or holistic answer. But I think that this is to say that religious people are not scientifically minded. We don't deny science. You remember, science just means the process of how things happen. It doesn't mean science is not a thing which creates. If I roll a ball across the table, there's the science of how it moves, but it doesn't explain anything else. So we believe in science. Every time we get up and we walk across the room, it's science. I mean, of how our body moves. But I think that, while we agree that there are forces at play in the universe, what we're saying is that the ultimate mover and cause behind those forces is Allah. And scientists, scientific community, they cannot agree upon what is the first cause of everything. We agree with them that there are forces at play, and we can measure them, and we can see them in some respects and detect them. But the scientific community doesn't right now have an explanation about how things come into being. We do. So I think until they come up with a better explanation, they'll have to entertain our one.
100%. I think one of the best things for them, sometimes arguments are almost pointless. For such people, I think, like you felt the awe of Khilafat, I think we just need to invite them and just show them the blessings of the Jamaat and how the Jamaat is running. I think these are those things that really open their minds up, and they start to realize how God does exist through the work of people, and that's something which can't really be explained in words. It's something which you need to feel, need to experience, and that will be another avenue of bringing people like that into the Jamaat as well. This is a very interesting question, something which I didn't think of, but I'm sure every convert goes through this. What was your family's reaction to this change of you accepting Ahmadiyyat?
Right. So actually, I was very blessed that, because you have to remember, most people's introduction to the word Islam was 9/11, and so that was my introduction to Islam as well. I didn't really, maybe heard the word Islam before, but I didn't register it. So we had this concept of Muslims, being terrorists basically, and being, I know it's a rude thing to say, but basically being uncivilized people, because we saw Islam through the prism of the news which was being fed to us, and that's all we knew. We didn't have any other experience of Muslims. So when I started getting interested in Islam, obviously I was learning the correct what Islam really is through Ahmadiyya. But for a large part, my parents still had that other idea of Islam. So naturally, they were worried. They weren't stopping me. They were just concerned about me, which is natural. Any parent would be, that you're concerned which direction your children are going in, whatever age they are. But the turning point really was when they met members of our community, and you realized, how wonderful and lovely people they are. They're human beings. They're not radical. They're really wonderful, and we have some wonderful Ahmadis here in Ireland, and their personalities. They realize that these are actually really wonderful people, and they're nothing like the what you see on the news and these other so-called Muslims. And so I was able to do a little bit of tabligh to my own family, obviously, and slowly they began to realize that the decision I was making was not to my detriment. They were still a little bit wary when I became Muslim as well, but I think over time the positive change which they've seen in my life, they're convinced, obviously, that I have made the right decision, at least anyway. Alhamdulillah.
I think that's the key thing. I think with any convert, is the families are always looking, is this person going to become a better person or a worse person?
Yeah.
And I know with my own grandmother, when she accepted Ahmadiyyat, at the time, Christianity was people were still practicing quite a lot, but now most of her family have stopped practicing. But she has continued, and you can see that difference. That's what Ahmadiyyat gives you. It continues your relationship with Allah the Almighty and allows you to carry on doing good works in terms of that. So it's very, as you said, it's a blessing that your family reacted in that way, and now, alhamdulillah, I think they can see and look at you and really say, if they could, alhamdulillah, that our son or our sibling has accepted something which has made him a better person. And along with becoming a better person, along with our journey, we always look to increase our family. So with you, did you always have a strong desire to marry within the Jamaat after becoming an Ahmadi?
Yeah, I mean, for the first few years, I wasn't thinking about marriage because I was just focusing on, you know, establishing myself as a Muslim or working and doing some study. But it was always in my mind that I was going to marry an Ahmadi, because if you believe in God and you believe in this Jamaat, so how can you, in my mind, how can you marry outside of it? You want the person that you love to share and love the things which you love. And if you love Allah and the Prophet Muhammad and Prophet and Khilafat, then you want someone who loves them as well. And I suppose the second thing is, if you think a bit further about your children, you want your next generation to be devout Muslims. And if you marry someone who's not religious, then at least there's a 50% chance that that's not going to happen. So it's always in my mind, in my prayers, that I would marry like in the Jamaat.
Alhamdulillah. And along with that, we know we are talking about tabligh. So it's good to know that some people think that tabligh is only for men. Only men can go out and preach. But have you seen aside with your family of Lajna getting involved in tabligh, which many Lajna are listening today, so maybe they can benefit from that as well.
Yeah, I mean, my experience from here in Ireland is that Lajna, many times they're more active than the men. I mean, because they have this great blessing of Lajna Maila, so they are completely, in a sense, autonomous in that they can make their own decisions about what they want to do, and they do well. Obviously, now there's the pandemic, but they do lots of interfaith programs for ladies, peace programs, exhibitions in libraries, for example. And I just find, I mean, our ladies here in the Jamaat in Ireland are generally quite well educated, quite well integrated in the society. I think you have second and third generation Irish Ahmadis now. We're Irish, basically. They're born here. And I haven't seen, women being held back in any way from by Tabligh. I mean, if I look at my knowledge or my tabligh efforts or my activities, like they pale in comparison to my wife. Like the tarbiyat she does with my daughter. No, my daughter is doing tabligh as well. So yeah, I always think that Lajna are ahead of the men here. I mean, men are doing good, but I think Lajna just have, because they have other qualities as well, and certainly in the upbringing of the children as well, and they can turn their children into little tabligh machines. So there's nothing that I've not seen anything where my own personal experience where women are being held back from doing tabligh. In Ireland, they're very active.
100%. I think that in itself is such a great way of tabligh, that many people think that our women are suppressed in our religion, but you just speak to us, the men, and we'll tell you how much more work they're doing than us, and how much more empowered they are within Lajna Imala to have that freedom to go out and preach, which is such an amazing thing. I think that's throughout, not just the UK, but maybe throughout the world as well in the Jamaat. So they are, you can say, the unsung heroes of our Jamaat, alhamdulillah. Just lastly, because we are in a pandemic, and as you know, with the Jamaat, we don't ever like to let work stop. So especially with tabligh, could you just give some tips or advise us how we can carry on doing tabligh, or how you have been carrying on doing tabligh?
Few things we've been doing. Obviously, social media is one. You can do it as a Jamaat, or you can do it as an individual. You can post things, and everybody knows about that. We have done some tabligh stalls in the last few weeks, but now the numbers have gone up. We've had to stop again. Obviously, we're taking the precautions. And again, though many people would not necessarily be coming to our stalls now because of the pandemic, they're still seeing the face of the Prophet ﷺ, or we're putting a different message in the front. So even if we're just there for people to walk past and see the sign, is very good. We're using this time actually to educate our own Jamaat members. We're, like you're doing, we're using Zoom to hold question and answer sessions, and MK Ireland are doing lecture series. And this is the time where we're stuck inside a lot, so we can read the books of Prophet ﷺ, we can watch MTA. We have more opportunity to increase our own knowledge. We are working on some projects here in Ireland to do some podcasts, which hopefully will, for the public, for non-Muslims, which hopefully will start middle of next month. That will be open and will be advertised on social media. But you're very limited. I mean, everything is basically online. But everyone has some contacts, some non-Muslim friends, and you can use this time obviously to check in on them and see how they're getting on, because a lot of people are feeling isolated, even if it's just emotionally. And we know as Muslims that the blessings and the remedy of spirituality, and you don't know what door. We know about all the difficulties which are happening now, but we don't know what door Allah is opening, because when I've seen in the history of the Jamaat is whenever there's been a block in the way, Allah has made a door in it to go further. So something good which we can't see now will come out of this for the Jamaat. Just keep praying and trying, I suppose. But MTA is always there. I mean, the MTA is running all the time, and other mediums. And I think if we just promote them, then, because more people are online now as well, people are spending more time online, because what are you going to do when you're stuck at home? So that's, what you're doing, basically in UK as well.
Jazakumullah. Yusuf Sahib, and it is getting late, and I know the kid must be wanting to go to sleep now, along with my children as well. So I just want to extend my gratitude to you for such an insightful talk, and so many things we can take from that, and it's probably going to take us time to just digest all the things that we've talked about, and try to make a list of the things that we can actually do. So it was a very inspirational talk, and we talked about many different topics in the short time that we had, and I'm very grateful to you for you to be able to share your time with us. I know you have a lot of things going on as well in Ireland, as you already mentioned. So on behalf of the whole of the West Midlands, I would like to say Jazakumullah, and may Allah continue to bless all the work that you are doing for the Jamaat, and may Allah give prosperity to the Jamaat in Ireland, and inshallah we'll see the Jamaat in Ireland grow double, triple, inshallah, over the next few years. And
Inshallah.
many people are saying Jazakumullah also in our comments. So as tradition goes, Yusuf Sahib, we always end with dua. So if I could request you to lead us in silent prayer, and we'll give a close to the meeting. Jazakumullah.
Okay.
Jazakumullah. Just for everyone's information, alhamdulillah, we've gone to Iceland, and now we've visited Ireland. Tomorrow, inshallah, we'll be taking a virtual flight to the hot country of Spain, Barcelona. So Yusuf Saab and family, if you guys want to join us on this virtual aeroplane, there are plenty of seats. So everyone's welcome to be aboard. So inshallah, we'll have a talk from a missionary in Spain tomorrow, and similar things, and let's find out what Tabligh activities are happening there. Yusuf Saab, everyone, Jazakumullah for joining today. It was a pleasure and an honor as well at the same time. Jazakumullah, everyone. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.
Assalamu alaikum.